Welcome G. Let's start Java tutorial. So today I am going to discuss on interface. What is the meaning of interface and how Java use interface? What kind of difference uses? What is the syntax? And what with the some example as well as. So general meaning of interface with respect to the programming language is just like a contract that spell out how their software intellect. Okay, right. This is just between the contact, uh, how to use this. Let's see, this is our software. Okay, this software define multiple method 1, method 2, method 3, method 4. So interface and the client which want to access this. So might be this is a multiple interface. What is really needed? What is not really needed? Maybe some private method. So here interface customer know ki this is the only public method. A public C is the for your client. So you can define here your A method and C only the method signature. Okay. So that this client only invoke this or know this, and how what is the implementation of this method is define your implementation class. Might be same interface may be implemented by vendor 1, simply another vendor they want to behave same behavior, the interface would be the same interface can be implemented by this vendor, same override this method and giving the different vendor 1. So interface is just defined a contact between the software component and the end customer, how client going to use your software. They don't worry how to implement, maybe different implementation, different implementation. The contract is the just spell out which set of methods, which set of methods client can use. Okay, if you look the example like also there is a JDBC, if you know this is a JDBC driver. Okay, JDBC is the interface. Okay, so JDBC specify कि lots of database available, maybe MySQL database available, Oracle database available, PSQL available, Postgres available. But the as a client program, let's say Java program, want to interact with a particular database. Each database provides a different implementation, how to insert query, how to get query, how to select query. So this is the very problem for writing a code. So there is some common interface. They know if you want to connect to any database, I want to uh, get a query. This is the syntax query. Execute query. This is the query. The setup is standard defined here. Okay. Okay, this kind of method as a JDBC Java developer need. If any database vendor want to provide key my database can be used by in a Java application, so they have to provide the implementation of this interface. Okay, they provide the implementation, they provide the implementation, they provide the implementation, or they these details are provided interface. So as a application, as a user, as a user of this interface, know this is the sequence we have to invoke the method. Who implement? What are the specific database? We are not going to talk about the specific database. I'm not going to. This is the Oracle syntax, so we have to know this query. This is the MySQL syntax, so we have use this query. So this is your software provider, and this is your software consumer. So how software consumer consume your function, which method invoke, what is the syntax, that should be defined in the contract. That is, this contract is interface, and this interface same interface can be implemented by MySQL database, can implement by Postgres server, can implement by Oracle, can implement any other database. So interface is a contract between your software provider and a software consumer. Okay. So let's sorry, let's look about your interface in a Java as a programming language. How Java we can achieve this interface in the Java programming language. An interface is a reference type. Okay, this is a reference type. not a user defined data type, not a it's a reference type, similar to a class that can only contain constants. In interface, what you can define? You can define constant, you can define method signature, not the body, method signature, or default method, and a static method as well as. And nested type means nested type interface inside interface. So first thing, interface in the Java look like a one interface reference types. They have refer to particular types. Method body exists only for the default method. Okay, if you want to define some method body, so for default method and static method you can define body. Okay, interface cannot be instantiated. Means you cannot create the object of an interface. Okay, interface just specify the okay, they can only be implemented by the class or extended by another interface. So this is the basic rules. Java program interface. What is the interface? Interface is a reference type. Look like as a class. Okay. They contain your constant. They contain method signature, default method, static method, or nested interface. And in the case of your default method and a static method, can you define the body of the visualize? An interface cannot be instantiated. Mean you cannot create the object of interface. Any class can extend your interface, and any interface can extend another interface as well as. Okay, so let's discuss in syntax. So if you're talking about the your how to define interface, how to define interface. So interface declaration consists of your modifier and interface keyword, interface name, and comma separated list of your parent interface, if any. Okay, the here look like this is the, your access modifier, public private. This is your interface name, interface keyword, which you have to say this is the interface, your name of the interface, your name of interface, and maybe interface 1, interface 2, interface 3, any other interface you can extend. And inside interface, what you define a constant. You define your any method signature like this is your void method signature and method signature. So let's write example like let's we have a written interface like a shape. Okay, shape is interface. In this interface, you can define constant. Okay, and that's key. And you can define constant maybe integer c equal to 100. You can define constant, you can define method signature, go void show. You can define your method. This is the method signature. You not define a method definition. You can define your default method. Means you have a default and then maybe method. Okay, default method can give a definition. A default one. What is the return type? That's method. Okay, default method you can define. You can define a static method. So this is the way you can define another interface as well as in inter interface maybe nested. Interface. Here you can define nested interface as well as. So and your interface can extend. Let's see another interface. Interface your parent maybe parent interface. You can your uh, extend interface can extend. So this is the overall syntax of an interface. Maybe we have a multiple parent. Maybe we can say key interface one interface, P interface face one, interface two. So one interface can be extend comma P interface two. So this is a complete kind of syntax of your interface. You can, if you want to declare interface, you can use the keyword interface and interface name, shape, and can, if you want to your interface can extend multiple interface. This is interface one, interface two. Here you can extend multiple interface, and inside you can define any constant. You can define any method signature. Can define default method. Can you define your static method? Can define another interface as well as. Okay, this is the your you can say complete syntax of your interface, and you can also here write your s out. See, default method. See, here give definition. So you have to be ensure only your default method can give the method body and static method give method body. In the case of instance method, you cannot define the body. You can only give the signature here. This is the method signature. So and let's here talk about the, you can also specify here access modifier like a public access modifier. That means this interface can be used by any class in any package. If you do not specify any interfaces, if you do not specify that the interface is a public, then interface is accessible only to the class that defined in the same package, right? So this is the normal behavior of modifier. As we explained, the interface can extend other interfaces. Okay, just like a class, a subclass, class and subclass are extend in other classes. However, the class can extend only one other classes. This is the restrictions key. In the case of if you have one class, they can extend only one class. Okay, but in the case of interface, this is a class. In the interface, we can extend one interface, they can extend another interface, they can extend another interface. This is support multiple inheritance interface types. This is support only single level inheritance. So interface can extend any number of interface. So interface declaration include the comma separated list of your all the interface. Okay, look like here we are say this is our interface one, comma interface two, comma interface three. So your interface can extend multiple interface, can define constant, can define method signature, can define default method, can define a static method, and can define another interface, a natural interface. So now let's discuss if you define an interface. Okay. So I discussed interface body can contain your abstract method. So what is the abstract method? If you writing any method, if you not defining the any definition method signature, look like this is the abstract method here. Or you can specific say abstract void so on. Okay. In this way, of course, you can define abstract method as well as, okay, abstract method as well as. But by default, nature of your interface, whatever you are defining any method signature, if you not specify anything by default, this is the abstract. You can specify or doesn't specify the meaning is abstract. So here say you can define your abstract method, you can define default method, you can define static method. Abstract method within the interface is followed by the semicolon. Okay, no braces. The abstract method does not contain any implementation, right? Default methods are defined, the default modifier, static method with static keywords, and all abstract method, default, static method in the interface are implicitly public. Okay, so here one thing, if you here you can write public, okay, or so if you write or not write, by default this assume this is the public, this is all the public, all public. So unnecessary writing the default, you can just omit this you can omit this. By default interface say this is the like a public. So this is the public, this is the public, this is the public, this by default all the data member declare inside the interface by default the public, they assume it's public. And the addition interface can contain constant declaration as you know, the constant value defined in the interface are implicitly public, static, and final. Okay, so here you can also declare like any constant public, static, final, int, constant 1 equal to 10. Okay, so this is the way, but both are the same. Here integers is same, this is the public, static, and final. You cannot change final means you cannot change the value c1 to this. Static means that can be only one copy in the memory and that can be accessed from your class name. Public means it's accessible anywhere. So you are writing or not writing by default instance behavior and nature, whatever defining any variable. Okay, by default it's a constant, static, and final. So unnecessary, don't need to specify this. Okay, similarly in the case of your static method, by default is the public. Okay, you don't need to specify. So, whenever you are declaring any variable interface, by default those variables are public, static, and final. If you are declaring any method, by default this is the public. Okay, so this is the default behavior of interface. Okay, and let's key. So let's you have a defined interface. Then some class going to implement this interface. Okay, to declare a class that implement an interface, you include the implements keywords. Okay, your class can implement more than one interface as well as. So implements keyword followed by the comma separated list of your interface to implement. So by convention, implements is the and the clause is the this is only one. Okay. So generally convention by convention implements clause followed the extension clause if anyone. Okay, if a class have a extend uh, class 1 extend class 2, okay, and this class can comma implement multiple interface. So it implements multiple things, extend only one class can extend only one another super class and implement multiple interface. Let's here uh, let's see we have a one class uh, uh, super super, okay, and another class like shape means this going to implement shape. Okay, so we have to uh, shape maybe your circle shape. circle, your implements your interface shape. Okay, in this way. uh, Whenever you are going to implement any interface, they say you have to implement all the abstract method. Okay, a circle class must either declare abstract or implement abstract method like a show. Okay, so these are the by default your abstract method. So you have to define the abstract method inside here. These are the public, so by default they are inherited. Okay, and your class can extend कर सकते हैं, extend your super class. Okay, I implement maybe shape 1, maybe another interface like shape 2, and interface shape shape 2. Okay, so you can implement shape 2. Okay, so here again we have to until you are not specify the if you don't want to declare this method here, the two cases, or you can implement or you can write either the abstract, so it's allowed. If you want to implement this interface, okay, so first don't write this, I am going to implement here. So you have to implement this to interface. Now your class is okay. So here is out. So be ensure that whenever you are going to implement any interface 1, interface 2, whatever the abstract method defined here, by default all the public method signature in interface are abstract. So those abstract method you have to give the definition here. What is the body? What is the definition here? If you are not providing definition of this abstract method, so this class or this class you declare abstract. The two way to solve this issue, or you can giving the definition, or you can making a class as abstract. Okay, so let's see how we are going to use it. So how to use interface? So I say ki, using the interface as a type. So interface is a reference type first. Okay? When you define a new interface, you are defining a new reference data types. Okay, and you can use this interface name anywhere. You can use any other data type like name. You can define the interface variable whose types is the interface. Okay, and any object you assigning to it must be instance of a class that implement the interface. What the meaning is that? So here you have to define your safe interface. So safe interface you can just like a data types, just like here. So here like your data type integer uh, a equal to 10. Okay, this is your the data type. This is the variable. A variable assigned here. Is it similar your data type? Your save is a reference data type. They have a one kind of a reference. Okay, here. Here what you can similarly like you can declare variable and then you can assign value. Similarly here declare reference variable, or you can assign here reference object, reference obj, obj. Here you can what you can define You cannot create the object of shape. You cannot create here like a new shape. You cannot create. Okay, this is not allowed. Okay, okay. Shape is an abstract, cannot instantiate it. Okay, why shape is abstract? Reason is that in this shape interface, you have defined a method signature only. That means this is the abstract method by default. So if anywhere we define any method, we are not giving the definition that is by default. This would be the abstract. The shape kind of abstract. They doesn't have any body. So where is the body? Body is defined. Body this body is defined by here. So you can create the object of this class. So here you cannot create the object, but you can create the object of your new circle. Okay. So uh, you can assign object in the reference type variable of the implementation class. That class implement this interface. Okay. The circle class implement your interface shape. Then you can pass here. And okay. Similarly, you have a let's similarly you have a method static display. Okay, display method void. They can take your shape interface, your reference object shape reference. Here from shape interface, the shape interface is given by your method. Like you can access your default method, you can access your default method, or you can access a show method as well. You can access your default method, you can access your show to method. So all the this method and access by your SIP. And general rule, if you want to access your SIP static method, you can use your interface name. And if you want someone want to invoke this display function, they have right here uh, display. Here you can write a reference object. So in this way, if you run it, okay, this is your circle class. So this is your circle class. So one. This is the static method in the shape interface. This is the shape interface. And maybe this so if let's get another class triangle, let's key implement your shape. Okay, so they have to define your two abstract method. Okay, inside your triangle class. Okay, triangle class. So here you can pass your display method. Take our object of reference. So here you can also pass display your new your triangle. So this is where you can also pass. Why you are able to? Why you are able to this display? This is the display method. Display method take the shape interface this take a reference object a reference object, but reference object is the type of shape interface. The shape is a reference type, and here you can pass the implementation of first time you pass the implementation of a circle, a second time you can pass the triangle. triangle is implement shape interface, so you can pass this as well. As the first time you pass the circle, they invoke a circle method. Second time pass with a triangle, then the triangle they invoke. Okay, so see, this show method is not depend upon which show method invoke, which reference object you are passing. If you are passing the shape circle implementation, this function show as a circle. The same this show function show, if you passing the reference object to a triangle, this is show a triangle, right? So this is, you can say, this is your abstract method. This is your abstract method. Okay, that this is the shape is your reference type. Whatever object you are passing, okay, depend upon that their show method was invoked. Okay, if you passing to your circle implementation, then this show print your circle show. If you passing a triangle object here, okay, they show the same show is the triangle. So shape is a reference type. You can declare the reference variable and you can initialize this reference variable. You can initialize your any class that implement this interface. Okay, so in this case, circle have implemented this interface. You can assign the circle. Or here, a reference object. You can pass any object that can implement the shape interface. So here, our triangle class also implements shape interface. So you can pass your triangle object as well as. So this is your reference types. And let's look some rule about default methods. Okay, so default method is enable you to add new functionality to the interface of your library and ensure the this binary library capability with the code written to the older version of those interface as well as. So what the meaning of that? Let's key sometime we have a one interface. Okay, that interface means the old interface. They have a define some like a method, and this is the multiple class may be implemented. This class implemented, another class implemented the same, another class also implemented the same. If you want to add some new functionality here, if you want a new another, if you want to add another method B, so this is the each class must going to override the B method. If you are not overriding the giving the definition of B, all are the compilation break. Assumption is that if this class implement an interface define a true abstract method, this true abstract method must be defined inside your class, all the implementation class, all implementation class. So sometime we want to give us some common functionality to each implementation. So you have right here default method. Sorry, excuse me. So this is the help use of your default method. Sometime you want to add the additional functionality to all the implementation class, then you can give a default method. As someone want to maybe override, they can override. So a default method enable you to add functionality to the existing interface and ensure the library compatibility with the code the other version as well as. So default method enable you to add and the lambda expression. I'll discuss in lambda expression in detail. Lambda expression, if your interface have only one abstract method, in that case you can implement those in a lambda expression. So here this is your shape interface. This is the shape interface. To have implementation in our example, we have a one triangle implementation, one have a, so both have a common default method. Okay, so if both references have a common output. Okay, so if you run here, you look like though both implementation have a one common implementation. This circle implementation have a default method. This is the common. Simply this is class interface have a, this is the default method. So sometime you want to add some default functionality to all the implementation. Don't want key my interface you have a 10 implementation. Okay, 10 implementation. So some common behavior you want to give here in the all the class. So instead of writing individual in the all the classes, it would be good you can write this is the common behavior here in the default method, and this default method accesses by all the object. So this is the advantage of a default method. And similarly your interface, if one interface, okay na, extend another interface that contain default method, then what behavior? Okay, maybe when you extend an interface that contain default method. Okay, so what is the scenario here? Okay, not mention the default method at all, which let your extended interface inherit the default method. Okay, so default methods by inherited in the next interface, and redeclare default method which make it abstract. Sometime you want to manually, you can declare as well as, and redefine default method which means you have overriding. Sometime maybe you are again going to the same, let's say here is the one interface. Okay, let's we have one interface and you are extending another interface. Okay, they have some default method, so this default method by default inherit here. In this interface also you are getting the same default method. Okay, the default method can be inherited and can be overridden. If you want to override the definition, you can override. Let's example. uh, let's in the same example, or you can write let's in this example, this is the our shape interface, have implement interface one, this is the default method. Okay, and this is the state. So this method you can, let's define here p1 interface, and this is their p1 interface, and okay, let's you have a, so in this case our shape interface is overriding this default method, and now if you run it, okay, this is your overridden, you are getting a over shape and shape. But what happen if for terms for short timing, let's key in the shape interface, and in shape interface I am, let's I am not defining this interface. Okay, and if you then, so this default methods is inherit from interface p1. Okay, this is the interface p1, interface p1. So you have a option, you can inherit or you can override. Let's key this is the, instead of let's key I am giving the method default super method default and another default method of, okay, this. So if you look here, if you here you are looking, you can okay, this is the reference object, and that this shape interface have a two method. This is the default method over his own, this is your default method from inheritance, so you can use the inherited method as well as. So but shape class doesn't define this scenery, but they can get the inherited method as well as. So here both. So this is the capability of default method. As per your use case, you have to define or interface. Okay, so interface, this interface are going to extend this interface, one interface two, and here this is an interface. They have extended this. They have extended this. If here you define some default method, by default they are inherited here. Okay, if you are defining some default method here, by default they are inherited here. We you have a option. If let's say I want to change the behavior of this, then you can override. Override means the same method you write the default in here as well as. And similar like a static method, you can also define a static method in a class. Similarly, you specify a method definition in interface is a static method with a static keyword. Okay, the beginning of method signature. So all the method declare in interface include the static method is are implicitly public, and so by default all the method if you're declaring in interface by default public, then you can just remove your public modifier, and easier for you to recognize the helper method for your library. Generally, we are writing an interface for interface and a contact for a particular customer, and these two particular vendors are going to implement the somewhere I want to make some helper class for this, helper class for this, helper class for this. So previously Java 8 from all the this static method and default methods are added from Java 8. So before Java 8 we want to write some helper method, though we have to write a separate helper classes and write the separate helper method. So here Java static method help us to write all the helper classes with respect to particular interface inside the interface itself, so that all the interface from interface name all the helper method you can access. Okay, look like here you have in the your shape interface, in the shape interface we have a written this here is static method. So this static method you can directly invoke from your class name itself. So the general practice is whenever you are going to invoke your static method, use your interface name and then this is the helper method. Okay. So in the last, you can say what we have learned about the interface till now. So interface declaration can contain your method signature. Okay, any method signature. Signature means your return types, your method name, and your parenthesis what and semicolon. This is your method signature. And can you have a default method? Can we define a static method? And can we define a constant? So only the method that have a implementation are the default and static. If you want to give the some particular method definition and body, so those the default method and static method you can give the definition inside the interface, and uh, uh, non default and non static method you only give the signature. You cannot define the logics, yeah, body of method. Okay, so those methods or definition are given by the class. So a class can implement an interface that must implement all the method declare in the interface. Okay, all the declare means all the abstract method. By default, you are writing any method signature. If you not specify default in static, that means that is the abstract method, and all abstract method must you have to implement in a class. An interface can be used any variety types. Okay, the similarly like a primitive data type integer, your a class data type class. Similarly, you can use the reference data types. And reference, if you are using the reference data type, you have to assign what the object, the implementation of this class interface. So one thing you have to noted that if your class like square square and going to implement a safe interface. Okay, they don't want, they just don't, they have given only one implementation. Okay, let's say they have given only one implement, they don't need to want to give the second one. So this class you have to mark as a abstract as well as. Okay, so you have a two option. If your if any class implement a safe interface, they are not defining the all your abstract method. They have a in safe you have a two abstract method, so and so on. If any class implements safe interface, they can define given the definition of two abstract method. So on. But if it sometime I don't want to give the definition of class A, this I want to only override the only one. So in this case, your class must be marked as abstract. Okay, and similarly, if your this you cannot create the your object of interface. Similarly, you cannot create the object of your abstract class as well as. Why? If why if why we are not able to create the object of shape? If you are able to, let's your square method allowed to create the square object. So from this object you can invoke two method, so and so on. But so one have not any definition. So compiler break. What is the output of so one? So when similarly, if we why we are not able to create the object of shape? If you create the object of shape and then from shape interface you are going to invoke so one method, but if any class does not define the giving the definition of so one method, what is the compiler going to invoke? So due to that, the safer side say you cannot the create of interface object, you cannot create the interface object. Similarly, you cannot create the object of your abstract class. Why abstract? Means this class abstract because they have a some method which doesn't have a definition. In this case, a so one method does not define any definition. So due to that, this is the abstract class. So be in short, please your interface, okay, and abstract class you cannot create object, okay. So but both are can use as a reference data type. We can assign the object that implement the all the interface of, okay. If any interface a class interface this, if a class let's to find interface define two method one and two. If this class extend only giving the definition of one method, then you cannot assign the object of this because this is the abstract class. Similarly, this another class B, they have given the definition of two both method, one method two method. So you can create the object of this interface this class because this class have a definition of all the abstract method, and then you can assign in your reference types. So be ensure whenever you are using interface as a reference types, if any method take as a your input is any in the interface as a input parameter as a reference type. So here as a what kind of object you can pass here? You can pass a class object that can implement the interface and then and must ensure that they have implemented all abstract method as well as. So only those class object can you pass to a assign to a safe interface. Okay, so this is the very and useful concept this is the in the Java. This is also known as a uh, dynamic invocation. This show function at the compile time you cannot show what is the output of show, but in this case here is the static type. Here always show they give the output of your static method, but here you cannot say what is the output of say which object you assign here while the calling. If you pass the circle object, they are invoke the definition of a so method from the service circle class. If you pass as a object of your triangle, so this so function is the come from your triangle. So this is the kind of a run times method binding. Okay, so hope it's I, okay from my side. So interface is in a simply a contract. Contract. This is the just contract is the whenever any software component going to use. So what kind of a methods. So interface just define the set of required methods that can access by your client, and this method can be implemented by the vendor 1, vendor 2 or vendor 3. Okay, so our client code is not going to the bound to specific maybe vendor 1 specific implementation, vendor 2 implementation, vendor 3 implementation. They are highly depend upon this interface, and interface define the only signature of a method. Okay, this is the signature, this is your return type, this is your name, this is the input parameter. The same signature is implemented by the vendor 1, vendor 2, vendor 3. Hope it's clear about the interface. Okay, so again here I would like to say uh, thank you for watching this video.